Kennedy shows minimal engagement with vast health portfolio. Corey, you linked this in the New York Times, and it really shows just how I can't. It's remarkable to me just how unserious the Trump administration is, and everyone in it. How they have no, they're not engaged with this at all, of being in these positions. They don't want to actually do the work. They actually don't want to be educated. He's not taking the presidential daily brief, and Trump just watches TV all the time. But that's just Trump, right? That's just his thing. And surely he could still manifest people around him that are competent, and that, at least because he's a businessman, and that's what they all say. But then you have something that's RFK. He has presumably been fighting his entire life in order to fight these corporations, in order to push this agenda, to hold these pharmaceutical companies accountable. That's what he says. And then now he's in this position to have, he's never going to be president of the United States, right? Can we just let's all admit that, right?
I hope not, but
there's
I
no
don't
way.
put anything past the American public at this point.
Oh yeah.
You wouldn't think a reality.
Which one are we talking about? RFK?
Kennedy shows minimal engagement with the vast health portfolio.
I don't think Kennedy even wants to go to be president. I don't think he's ever shown any interest. Sorry, he has shown interest because he ran.
Yeah.
But that guy. It was clearly to raise his profile. Right? People do that to raise their profile. But anyway, I guess I would agree with your thesis that he's not going to be president. Yeah.
And I learned a lot during this article. It's really interesting. He's not engaged with this at all. He's not actually doing the work. That was obvious. But man, some of the stats were remarkable. 340 million Americans, but 40% of the population gets their health care through Medicare and Medicaid. I had no idea that it was that much. 40%. I thought that was I was really stunned by that.
So both of them combined, that sounds about right. There's the elderly, right, who are going to be in Medicare, pretty much universally, except for maybe the ultra wealthy. And then there's a large amount of people who fall below the threshold, who will take advantage of Medicaid. The 40% seems pretty right. There's a lot of old people, and there's unfortunately a lot of people who are struggling.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's I guess I never thought about it in that terms.
Yeah, if you don't ever think about it, now I hear you.
Yeah. But he's not held any serious meetings about the Ebola conflict. He hasn't actually done. He's not engaged with this at all. He's made no public statements. He has just completely been disengaged about this. And when asked, he just basically said, "I'm not. We're talking about it." What? That's it.
It's just this entire administration is all, from my estimation, all memes. Nothing serious. It's all aesthetics. We see it it's an administration largely ran through whatever posting on social media, and even just posting on the White House webpage, right? It's all largely about messaging, not actually doing anything, right? I now have lost track of is there an Iran deal currently, or is that off the table? It seems to change by the hour, or we're winning, or rather U.S. is winning the war in Iran, but then not. And then even now, whatever, you just see Secretary Hegseth just, posting on Twitter, his exercises. I don't know what he actually does aside from that, but maybe he's actually doing something. But all that to say is yes, everything outlined in the article about RFK is sadly not surprising, where it seems he clocks in. I think it was they say he clocks in at 10:30 and then clocks out at 4 p.m. And that he has his specific meetings, but he's largely inaccessible. And even then, he seems to have his own sort of like whatever assistant that everything has to be ran through that person. I can't remember the person's name.
Yeah,
But like I think they were largely in charge of his campaign when he was running for president.
exactly.
And it seems like that person is sort of like a maybe not a puppet master, but like it's like they're the gatekeeper.
And they can't get things done. They couldn't. There was specific reports and specific ideas that they wanted to push through, and because everything is, yeah, Susan Wiles, thank you, Helen. Yeah, she's like, they're not doing things efficiently. Like they're trying to take hold of this, but they're not doing it efficiently, and it's because critics quote critics say one of the most urgent problems is Kennedy's failure to act swiftly to address the leadership vacuum. There is no Surgeon General.
Surgeon General, yeah.
Around half of the 27 institutes and centers at the NIH are run by acting directors. The acting chief of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease was recently fired. The leader of the FDA quit last month under overpressure over the tobacco policy. Kennedy fired the CDC director, and it's now run by an acting basis of Jade Bhattacharya, who is already the director of the NIH. You know, and this happened with Trump 1 too a lot. It was just, you know, they don't have a theory of the case that government should work, and they feel like the swamp are these public officials, so why are they, in their minds, maybe they're like creating more of the problem or more of the, you know, the swamp by nominating people?
I don't know exactly what the philosophy is, or rather, I think actually you more or less highlighted it in terms of like for them, no government is effective government, right?
Yeah.
And I think this potentially overlaps with actually like a topic that we spoke about on one of Prime's panels of like, if I remember correctly, like a lot of ambassador positions are left unfulfilled, or rather like these positions are open, waiting to be filled, but then they're just not going filled. So you have multiple countries that they have vacant ambassador positions.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, and with these health institutions, like they're pretty much being gutted from their expertise, as in this is like institutional expertise that's going to be gone forever and not be filled for, I imagine, years or decades to come.
Yeah.
The stream today, the link is in the group TM.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what is the least offensive way to say this. I don't know. I don't know. It might be for the best that he's checked out. Like this. Think about this. What value does like RFK Jr. add to this organization? I mean, like the whole thing is the whole reason we're doing this show is because he, he's a detriment, right? So the fact that he's just like not involved, I think it's good, for my political propaganda purposes, right? To push my point about how destructive and awful this government is, and like it's just a complete joke, and it's just not run by serious people. And so I'll talk about this.
I'll take it.
Like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's like, oh, do I want him applying what he does to like the FDA and the CDC, like the things that he actually sort of cares about, to an extent that he people like this can care about anything. But like, do I want him to apply it to the wider Department of Health and Human Services? No, actually, I don't. Like, I don't want you involved. You're a know nothing, right? You're completely incompetent, and you would be no one if not for your name. So I don't want him to be involved. I mean, that doesn't necessarily save us, though, to be fair, because like, if I mean if the level below him are also like political appointees or handpicked any which way, yeah, and rather than the bureaucrats who've come up within within the organization, then it doesn't really help all that much. But it depends. I don't know the structure well enough to say one way or the other. Um, but like I'm curious, like who is doing the work, who the decision is done by a lot of the bureaucrats. This is why actually the Trump administration is doing a lot to clear them out, right? The Trump administration
Mhm.
is making changes to federal workforce regulations to allow them to get rid of more of the individuals, right? This is part of Project 2025, um, because like they realized in the first Trump administration that something that held them back was the federal bureaucracy, and that like the Trump administration would say, oh, we're going to do something insane or expensive or unconstitutional or mix of both, right?
Mhm.
And then they would nod their heads in meetings and immediately not do that thing. Because they're not also idiots. So like part of the like one of the bigger projects of Project 2025 is to be able to clear out, right? To just like destroy. I mean, shrink the federal workforce in general, at which they've had some success in, but also just to like clear out and putting in loyalists. This will be important because later on in the next administration, right, if they are successful in doing this, and I have no reason to believe they haven't been,
Mhm.
like those people can sabotage the Democratic um, administration that's coming in, right? So uh, this is a big problem overall. I think it's a bigger problem rather than like necessarily what RFK is up to, right? So yeah.
That's fair. Although I
Not
take
that
your
I'm
point.
saying this is a bad topic. I am not criticizing your topic or anything. I'm just like, yeah.
Uh, Um, but like, yeah, I'm curious how you. I guess you maybe you shared it, but like, I understand the point in terms of like, do you want RFK doing anything? As in, it might be better for him to not be doing anything. But then it's like, in some sense, you're rooting for him to fail, right?
I
And
know.
just like some and like is and I think that's a valid position. But I wonder how I guess you Americans feel of like rooting for a president and your institutional leaders to fail, right? Because at least I guess
I
the
mean,
patriotic thing to do is like
what is success though?
that's
Like,
true, yeah.
I mean,
I
like,
mean,
yeah, like
I
the
think
the,
like
the
success would be like Trump won, where it's like he at least has people that are staffing this as opposed to or trying to. I don't know. I mean, it just seems a lot different in the versus Trump 2, where it is like truly incompetent on purpose, burning the house down versus like QAnon conspiracy of why Trump can't be Trump and that all that. I'd much rather deal with the QAnon conspiracy world than just us completely abandoning the world and people like tens of millions of people dying.
Yeah, I could see that case as well. But like I take the point of like what is success, as in like do we want them to be successful in implementing their agenda, whatever that. Well, we know what their agenda is, and they're pretty
Mm-hmm.
explicit about it. And so it's like, yes, I understand in that context of like rooting for failure. But then I guess it's like rooting for the success that you want, as in like can let's say Democrats steer it or minimize the damage. But obviously we don't see that happening, right?
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
think
it's a
that he
tricky thing.
believes the things that he says that he believes. I think that's the problem, is that they don't actually believe that vaccines harm more people than the virus, for example. Like, but they just say that stuff in order to rile the base and all that kind of stuff. And now they have all the ability in order to do all this insane stuff, all these studies that they've been looking to do, their terrain theory, anti-vaccine people have been like, oh, now we have the stuff. And there was actually, I was watching a video last night, Tom Cohen, he has, he's a disgraced MD that basically was prescribing medications off label for people where he hadn't even read the medical file for, got his license removed in California. Now he's a health coach. Now he's a health coach. And he was
Anybody
even
can be a
saying,
health coach, I'm pretty sure.
it's pretty nice gig. Now he sells $50 herb spice kits that like protect you from all ailments. You know, it's amazing. Like, so, but he was even saying they have this study, you know, in order to show that viruses are fake, and but RFK refuses to do it. He won't listen to him, you know. So, like, I don't know if they actually believe these things. That's part of the problem too. It's like I think that he's using these lawsuits in order to make money off of like suing the pharmaceutical companies, but I don't think that he actually believes like this stuff necessarily. You know, he would be like we were talking about before. He would be acting a lot differently if he actually thought that vaccines were poison. Like you would come in and you just ban them. You'd have
actually
to.
harmful.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
you'd have to.
I believe he has explicitly made the claim, although correct me if I'm wrong, of like he has made the claim that, you know, vaccines have caused overall more harm or like have killed more people than, let's say, COVID.
Yeah.
If you I would agree that if you genuinely believe that, you should be acting way differently. Or if anything, like you should be considered a failure based off what you are doing or not doing. Because like vaccines are still technically, even though they revised the schedule and all that stuff and put up some barriers, vaccines are largely still to some extent accessible, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But if you believe all vaccines are poison, well, you are making poison accessible now, and that should be considered a failure. So I agree that maybe he's a little bit difficult to read, but I lean towards him not truly believing the claims that he's making. But that's where it's like almost more disappointing, as in why, well, not that I know for sure, absolutely, but like, why do other people believe that he's sincere? What are they seeing that they're able to view him as he's a sincere actor, of like, he genuinely cares about the health of America, right? As in like his pushing of beef tallow or frying your food in beef tallow. That's for, you know, that's for the genuine health of Americans. And that, you know, revising the food pyramid, which, you know, wasn't the worst thing in the world. Like, but even then, that's not like there was not like a major overhaul.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, what I'm curious, like what the analysis or what the Maha movement is seeing, that they view him as like a sincere actor. And I asked the same question about Trump. But like, of what do people see about Trump that some people believe that he's like sent by God to like oversee America.
Yeah.
And
I mean, they're so similar in that fact. Like they both really not engaged. Like if they feel like that this is their duty, their work in order to get done, the guy's showing up at 10 a.m. and leaving by 4 every day. And apparently he's this health conscious dude and he works out. Dude, I mean, come on, guys. Yeah, if you're serious about working out, you're hitting the 6 a.m. You're hitting that's the second shift. 4 a.m. is the first shift. Second shift is 6 a.m. Like you're not hitting 9 o'clock. You know, if I have to do it because I have kids, but you know what I mean? The 6 a.m. is where you actually get it done, because that's when you know you can get it in. And that's so it's really important. The guy is just
6 a.m. he's doing the TRT and the peptides. Then
yeah, exactly. It's just fake.
Well,
it's
he
just,
doesn't have kids, right?
I think does he? I has to, probably grown kids. I mean,
yeah, like grown kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just fake. It's just so performative. That's it. It's just so performative, man. Coming in late. He works remote for most of these meetings. He's just coming in. This is the anti-remote work administration, right? They literally banned.
wasn't there some sort of like a mandate or executive order, or I don't know, there was some sort of like request of like remote work is bad and people should be in office working.
Yep. My friend that works, they're contracted out through the Department of Energy, and they said that after like Trump 2 happened, they changed basically and said that like they had to up that amount, and they had mandatory in office time now. because of Trump too. So it's like it's just, I don't know, man. But yet here RFK is just like not in a lot of the meetings. RFK's just sitting in them remote.
That's just how unfortunately it works with management. Of like, management has these requests of the employees of like, oh, this is good for the good of the employees, but then I'm the exception because, well, I'm in charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, not surprising that he's not fully engaged in that. He doesn't seem to be that hard of a worker because, well, like again, if he truly cared, I would imagine it would be reflected in the work hours that he puts in.
Exactly.
Or at least you would see something in his actions that shows that he cares. But I don't see that. But again, maybe I'm blind. I don't know.
And it's just all these acting directors that are coming in that have no idea what to do or have never ran anything like this before, that have no experience in this type of thing, and they're being shoved into these positions and they don't know what to do. There's examples in here where it's just like they're being shoved into these things and like they're doing things that are completely outside of the norm, right? On how the United States government would normally respond to these things, right? The rule book has been burned to the ground, and now here they come, and they don't know what to do. It's just it's crazy.
And even the revolving door of appointees or like of these positions of like director of the CDC and all that stuff. It's like that does not reflect poorly on the. No one seems to care. Well, aside from maybe us, and well, I guess us that are political and others that are politically aligned with us. But again, the Maha movement and there appears to be no political or optical cost to this.
Yeah. I mean, like, I guess it's like an interesting question, like how I do think that there is like a government efficiency argument that Democrats should make, and anyone that's trying to improve, material conditions, and how can we use our tax money more efficiently? What can we do in order to, like the cutting waste and fraud, like that, those are all just like blanket statements that everyone can agree to, right? And I'm curious though, like as these institutions now like come in, I mean, is there just like Prime, do you think that there is more of a capability now for people to just completely redo these institutions? Like, are we trying to get back what we had? Do you think like what do we even know what a good HHS would look like?
I mean, as a leftist, I always want to go further. I think that, I mean, there's some level of some of these agencies that yes, I would like to get back. But like, I think that from the left perspective, which is different from the liberal perspective by like a lot, but from the left perspective, I think we need to make an argument for like taxes, not necessarily like increasing taxes on like the least of us, no, but like obviously progressive taxes, taxability. We already have that.
Trillionaires, you got to add one in.
Indeed. But like we need to make a forward proactive statement for like what these taxes are used for, like, and like why do we do this government spending? So often like Democrats are ashamed of like these programs, and they don't make a proactive case. Of course people are going to be willing to get rid of them. They have no idea what they do.
Yeah,
like it's interesting that the idea of government efficiency. Well, Elon, that idiot's Department of Government Efficiency, right? Like that thing, like it wasn't a new department that was created. It was a transformed previous department, which like the computer government like digital services something.
Yeah.
Um, and that was an interesting department in of itself. And I don't think many people all understand this story. That department came out of, if I'm remembering the story correctly, hopefully I'm not giving any misinformation. But like, if from what I remember, that department came out of the Obama care situation, specifically the website. I forget what that. The Affordable Care Act website. There was a name for it, but it's escaping me now.
Yeah, but
Um,
I remember, and it's referred to in the article, that sort of a debacle of like, if I remember correctly, there was a huge challenge of getting the website up and running, and there were huge technical challenges
it
with
was
that website.
it was a complete and utter mess. Literally, like there was a moment where they brought like President Obama to show him like the website. You know, when they're going to launch the the insurance products, right? From the Republican plan that Obama promoted. But anyway, yeah, when they were going to launch this website, like everyone around him, like they were holding their breaths because they knew it was poorly put together. They knew that this thing was like being held together by hopes and dreams. And it didn't collapse in front of him, but like as soon as the public got a hold of it, right? It was a complete mess. It was a huge embarrassment, and so they created this department. It's like, okay, well, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again, right? There was like a lot of miscommunication. There was a lot of inefficiencies in how the departments were working together, and a lot of like you know, like government inertia using old technologies and stuff like that. Like there's a whole list of failures. So they created this department to better like tackle and improve the government's technology stack.
Yep.
And they were doing great job. They were creating great things, including this free tax filing service that the government had that like became operational under Biden, and like had rave reviews. Like, you know, imagine not having to go to TurboTax, right, or to go to HR Block every year for your taxes. Just like using the government website, that's free. It has a lot of information any which way, and just like move through the process. People are saying that was fantastic. That office created that. Now that office is gone. That thing was destroyed, right? And also the tax thing. Trump got rid of that at the behest of TurboTax and all of them, right?
Yeah,
The next time you have to pay TurboTax, remember, they are the ones who stopped you from having a free alternative because it destroyed their business model. They donated to Donald Trump for that. So in any case, like, the point is that like you bring up the idea of government efficiency. I'll stop here. You bring up the idea of government efficiency, but and people have been trained to think that means spend less money, make smaller, right? Rather than, hey, why don't we like use it smarter, right? Like there's a certain level of government that we need to have to allow the services that that everyone relies on. When those when those services go away or they degrade, people complain then, right? But before we get to that point, why not have like using this tax money in a way that delivers better on these results? And it takes like actions like this. There's a fantastic effort, right, to upgrade the government's technology stack overall, and to help coordinate these things between these disparate departments that like otherwise it would have taken decades to make a decision, you know. But that's what I talk about when I talk about government efficiency. That's not what other people are talking about. Done.
No, exactly right, dude. I agree.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because like, and you brought up this point many times before, Prime, and I think it's a great point in terms of like when government is actually working well and efficient, you know, people don't notice, right? And even now when government is, you know, even not working as efficiently as it could be, like they don't appreciate or understand the entire infrastructure that's currently in place. And it's only really when things go wrong, of like, you know, that website for Obamacare. It's only at really true points of failure that gets highlighted. But then overlooking the vast infrastructure and everything else that is working with the government. But that's where it's like, I think, yeah, the example that you brought up of like a website where people can do their taxes, or if taxes were automatically done for people.
That's another
Um,
thing. Other countries do that. Yep, and that's great.
yeah, but that's where it's like, what's better? Is it better that the government creates like a website or some sort of infrastructure that people interface with, and they interface with it and they make it, let's say, more or less seamless, but the person has to actually do something, and they see that it works. And in my mind, that might send the message that, oh, government is working and doing something, as opposed to like if it gets done automatically, like people aren't going to notice, right? Or they're going to take it for granted, right? It like, even though that might be the more efficient approach, but it doesn't. I would say it may not necessarily send the message that government is working efficiently if it's done automatically, right? It doesn't catch the attention of the general public. If you
Exactly.
understand my point?
Yeah, and
As in,
bring.
like,
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, like, as in like the website approach. Not saying that it has to, you replicate it with people doing like their full taxes, but at least something that people interface with, that they can see that it works and it works well, as opposed to just like whatever, some automatic thing.
I'm not sure how to solve this problem. I'll end quickly, Greg, so you can jump in. But like, I'm not exactly sure the best way to solve this problem. Like what we could do, we could like try, increasing civic education, and let people know, like, and you just try to just like, tell them the information, but also I think it's important for them to see it. So like, I can imagine maybe schools doing like more trips, like involving like people seeing their government in action, right? Like taking kids and stuff there, and then it could be an effort in college. But the problem is that like as soon as Republicans get into office, there's going to be an effort to dismantle all that, right? Like,
well, that's brainwashing, what you're pretty much proposing, according to them.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, but that would be the effort. Like they don't want you to know like how government works, like in what ways it's helpful, because like the point is to dismantle that. They want you to think that it does absolutely nothing for you, right? The moment you learn the truth, right, then you're going to really resent when Republicans are trying to take it away from you. I mean, they've had like we'll just say for decades, right? Within this current, not it's not even the current incarnation of the Republican Party. From the Reagan's Republican Party. Sorry, let me just shortcut this. From Reagan forward, right? Like if we just like focus on that period of time, like there's been this narrative that the government's out to get you, and it can't do anything right. Repeated by mostly people who have zero idea what their government does, right, at all. And then you'll have the infamous sign, take your government hands off of my Medicare. That can happen. That can happen when you literally have no idea as to how any of this works. It's a tough problem to solve. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight in the article where they were talking about what you were talking about, Prime, a daunting portfolio. So under any circumstances, the HHS is difficult to run. It has 13 operating divisions covering a vast array of issues such as child welfare, pandemic preparedness. Past secretaries from both political parties say there are three main ingredients for success: understanding the work of the divisions, strong crisis communication, and muscular coordination with state, local, and international health leaders. Kathleen Sebelius, a former Kansas governor who resigned as Obama's health secretary after the flawed rollout of the healthcare.gov website, said she met with division chiefs regularly, likening them to her cabinet. Quote, "My goal was to really be informed by scientists to make sure that the NIH was at the table, that the FDA was at the table, that our global health people were at the table," said Ms. Sebelius said in an interview, adding, quote, "I was really schooled by the people who had been there before and who knew what the hell they were doing." Mr. Kennedy, by contrast, has delegated broad authority to Stephanie Speer, a long-term advisor who has been with him since his days as an environmental lawyer and functions as his protector and defender, according to people who know him. So I think especially in these jobs, there is like an institutional knowledge, aspect of it. It is there is a broader like civics portion of it, but there really is like time on the job, understanding who talks to what, how things actually happen, and you can kind of like see this when you have someone like at work or something who like understands what to do for new people. There's just like onboarding stuff that kind of falls through the cracks. There's how things work. There's little things that people do cohesively that people don't really know or talk about, and then when that person's gone, then it all falls through. So I think like there is a technocratic way of kind of like, okay, let's break it all down and like let's try to restructure this and try to understand this. But when I was working at the largest chemical supplier in the world, it was daunting to try to understand this. Like I didn't have the institutional knowledge, right? I had the scientific knowledge, but like how do I interact with all these like systems and stuff, and it was incredibly hard. I had to really lean on my coworkers to understand what was going on. But I like to have so many people with so many different departments and a vast variety of knowledge. I don't know how you would solve that other than I mean, honestly, like probably having like an AI assistant or something that can look at what all the tasks are, and maybe looks and sees like what actually happens. Maybe that is kind of like a solution in the future for this. But as of now, these are like people that have jobs that have real purpose, and they're not being filled.
Yeah. And going back to, I guess, this aspect of, government running well versus not well, and, what people notice. And like also going back to, I think, something I highlighted earlier in terms of, rooting for failure. But it's like, I think there's a case to be made, or, I'm curious, let's say what your thoughts are on it are of like, so, we're at this point, for a variety of reasons, but basically, there is a proportion of the population that does not trust or has lost faith in these institutions. And like as we're highlighting now, these institutions are being gutted, and loss of expertise in people. But these institutions still have people there, more or less trying to mitigate the damage, right? And I think we've spoken about it before, and there's articles written about this. Like, yes, despite all the changes at these institutions, there are people that are saying that I'm going to stick around because it's like, if not me, then who else? And if I'm not here, there's more damage going to be done. But I think there might be a case of like maybe more damage should be done so that people see that these institutions work, right? As in like maybe you should have twice the amount of measles cases, then people will pay attention, right? As in like, should it be damage mitigation at this point, or like do you send the message that these institutions work by, having measles, a much more extreme measles outbreak, right?
I mean, I guess it's tough, man. I mean, because we're talking about like not just like the measles prevention. We're talking about the way that things are being screened. That we're talking about so many things, and it's just like there's so much harm. I don't know, man. I don't know. It's a good question. Like, should the HHS director even have this much sway over this much stuff? Like, I think that is like, if they're going to be truly more technocratic and kind of be more autonomous. I mean, I think that kind of that makes more sense than having this overriding dictatorial authoritarian control where this guy can come in and just take it all out. I mean, it also comes into this weird part where you hear it a lot on people talking about the revolving door of politics too, right? Like we were talking about the FDA and there's a drug regulator right here. She was fired last May for her post at the FDA's top drug regulator, and like the reality is, man, that like as you go up in expertise, there's just less and less people. So
yeah, no, someone who is high up in a pharmaceutical company has the expertise to make the the transition to some
Yeah,
position in the government,
it just
unfortunately,
is that
inside the FDA.
and we're talking about institutional knowledge. We're talking about like expertise. Like there's just less and less people as you go up the pyramid that have that knowledge. Like if you're talking about this, I talk about this all the time with the conspiracy people because it's like the top coronavirus labs in the world are just the top coronavirus labs in the world. So they are linked together. A lot of them are linked together because they're sharing data, they're sharing, what they're talking about. So like is that a conspiracy? Like no, they're coordinating, they're doing that. And we see it a lot with like the revolving door of politics, and that's honestly like my hot take is probably that the revolving door of politics probably isn't as important as people think that it is. And it's probably better to have more like technocratic solutions at these agencies where they're open, they're transparent, and these people are doing good work that can be seen by others, and the due diligence reports and stuff can be seen. I think that is more important than like the same people kind of in those positions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm I largely agree with your point, especially when it comes to this aspect of the revolving door. But like, I also do understand the other side in terms of like optically it looks bad, and they understandably maybe don't fully understand of like what's going on there. Of like this person who was at this position at a pharmaceutical company, they probably have some very niche expertise, and it just happens to translate over into the FDA. Now, am I saying that that is the case in every single situation where that happens? No, definitely not. I'm sure it happens where someone like uh, through whatever connections, or it's like it's not driven by expertise. But all that to say, I'm hoping, and I largely lean towards it is driven by expertise. But I'm curious, for example, Greg, like going back to my earlier point of like should it be just damage mitigation? Like if you are working at one of these institutions and like these and in its current state, you know, uh, I'm asking you to speculate, but like, what do you think your approach would be? As in, would you stick around, or would you have the mentality of like, well, I need to stick around because for damage mitigation purposes, of I see that expertise is being lost. I'm going to be one of the few experts, good experts, that stays to mitigate the damage, or would you abandon ship? I can understand both
My
sides.
my it would be the same stance that I have right now, is that I'm not trapped in here with you, you're trapped in here with me. So whatever I had access to, a radical transparency, I would be talking to the media, I would be like disclosing whatever I could to whoever I could, being as public as I could, talking about this stuff to the point where they would have to fire me in order to talk about it. Like I think that's the only way to deal with this type of information. Being silent and being kind of like in the shadows and stuff like that, I don't think that works. I don't think that like
Well, you
going
can
along
potentially
with it.
do both in terms of like maybe stick around for a bit, see all the, collect all the data in terms of all the bad, and then just be a whistleblower, right, and quit and resign type of
I
stuff.
mean,
Or is
I
in the title like one hand on the steering wheel type of thing, but also with the transparency aspect.
I think that duplicitness could be taken and it could be construed in different ways. I think that like radical transparency is usually the way to go in the scenarios. Like that's how I would, as opposed to just like some huge data dump and stuff, because then you really don't have the ability and the expertise in order to shape that leak, to shape that information. Who are you in order to do that? I don't know. I don't like like Snowden and stuff like that. I don't really agree with like how he handled that scenario necessarily.
Sure.
So I do think like but I don't know. I think that the damage is already there, like, and the scientists, we're talking more about like a lack of people in these positions, more than like, what are these people doing? But it is interesting,
Well, yeah,
like
but you
what
mean one less
happens.
person, right?
I
Yeah.
do have my friend in this agency. I mean, there is standing orders that you are going to do work on projects that only the president of the United States agrees with. Like
Correct.
you're not allowed to work on projects or push anything that the president doesn't agree with. That is like a standing thing. And that's not even, they don't even work for the federal government. That's a contract. They're contracted out. So like theoretically it's an independent organization. They could do whatever they want, but which is unfathomable to me. I would be very hard pressed to do that. So I don't know, man. That's
Yeah, no, it's like I can see either way. Like speculating for myself as of now, probably lean towards of like, yeah, I lean as each passing day goes by. I lean more towards of like maybe damage mitigation is not the best approach, and like people should, well, see the true damage that's being done when these changes go unmitigated.
because
Basically the proverbial, people need to touch the fire and get burned before they actually modify their behavior.
Because at some point you are signing off on it, like by saying that and agreeing to the reports that are being taken out, or like imagine working for or doing and touching the acetaminophen cases with autism, and now he makes those baseless statements about vaccine causing autism. I mean, it would be it's awful. Like that, it would be that. I mean, what would you do? I mean, if you're already working on that, I don't know. Like, what do you say? I mean, he is being, taken to court about it. So it like the judicial branch aspect of it is kind of being pushed, but as a scientist, what do you say? Like, what would you do? Like, go out there if you're working for the NIH or something, like with those grants, or you're working as an advisor or something like that. Like, I don't know. I mean, he's making his own baseless statements, but he's representing the entire department.
Yeah, no, that's where it's like, well, if you're in the position to undermine, or rather, it would be viewed as undermining. I would not view it as undermining of like if someone speaks out saying, "Hey, what RFK is saying in regards to the link between Tylenol and autism, that's totally BS, and like the current evidence or data do not substantiate that." I personally would have no problem undermining that, but I also would recognize that I'm probably not going to be lasting long.
Yeah, exactly.
If I do that.
Prime, any closing thoughts on the ideas of the HHS and RFK's leadership of it? We're gonna, before we go to the screw worm.
And well, do you have any thoughts on the approach of what I was bringing up in terms of like mitigation versus non-mitigation?
Exactly.
I think you're basically making a well, you're not really making the argument. I understand you're just like asking the question, but like that sounds like an accelerationist argument, which like I don't know, man. I've got like young family members, like little kids. It's easy to say, well, I mean, I wouldn't mind these numbers going up, with the assumption that, oh, it's not going to affect the people of my life, right? I'd be heartbroken if I found out that Dr. Greg's children, came down with this.
Fair.
And and for all the others, right? Like even, the children of anti-vaxxers, because they didn't choose their idiot parents. So like numbers going up in that way, like it's easy to have a level of emotional separation from these things, and like not realize there are people behind it. Yes, it would make a better political point for me if like there were 10 kids dead from this, right? Like, or the numbers even went higher. It's something I could use in political arguments. Great. Also, there's 10 kids dead, So I'm not for that, especially not in this area. I mean, like in other places, maybe, I don't know, like there might be a better argument to be made when like the connection between life and death isn't so immediate. Health and Human Services has a big important job to do, and like the next topic that we're going to approach is another example of this of what happens when you don't have competent government. The next topic isn't necessarily about life and death, like human life and death, but billions of dollars.
Not yet, and hopefully it stays that way. But like,
well, I mean, I don't think the screwworms can affect like humans directly, but like it's just that, or I mean, they can't be like not like in a lethal manner as far as we know. But like like the consequences are just stark when you don't have these things. So like in terms of like remediation, you're talking about saving kids' life. That's always going to be a good thing, like just put it into that. But in terms of like hoping things fall apart, I mean, I don't. I mean, I guess I could have some examples of.
well, I wouldn't say I want to frame it as hope. At least I personally wouldn't frame it as hoping, but I take your point in terms of like
more like radical whistleblowing.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think? Like Snowden, and as a scientist, if you're working for here, like, what is your duty in order to, like expose as much data as you can, knowing that there probably isn't going to be much political impact, but then, like what do you think your like morally or ethically, like your duty is, as a patriot?
Well, I'll have to disagree with you in that. Like I thought Snowden, how he handled it was brilliant, and shout out to Edward Snowden. I mean, people still like don't. I think people have forgotten just like how much he exposed about what the American government is doing and its massive surveillance state. Gave us information that we didn't know before, and who knows if we would have ever found out like within our lifetimes, or it would have been one of those things 30 years down the line. You find out the government had been spying, had an immense spying program against the domestic audience. Like that was amazing. Shout out to him for doing that, and at great risk for himself. So like in terms of like whistleblowing, yeah, I'm absolutely for that. And we should also understand that both Democrat and Republican governments absolutely hate it. Obama was the most vicious to whistleblowers. He in the way he used the law against them, and journalists, whistleblowers and journalists. No one had been more vicious to them. And I'm not sure if Trump has even surpassed his use of like this like Sedition Act and all that. So it's bipartisan. That power doesn't like to be checked. Obama's famously said, sunshine's the best, like disinfectant. That was a lie, though. That was absolutely a lie. He didn't mean it. And so yeah, like governments don't like it when their secrets are told and they're questioned. But shout out to the people who do it. They're absolutely brave. They're heroes, and they should be treated as such.
All right, man. Awesome. Well,